behind the scenes. What's happening behind the scenes? Now, the beauty of prophecy is that it focuses your attention on the role players. And the role players are so clearly defined in the Bible that you cannot go wrong. Now, we will still be getting into the book of Revelation. There's a lecture coming up, Two Beasts Become Friends, when we deal with the Revelation side of the Daniel prophecy. The Daniel prophecy is the key to the Revelation prophecy. But we had a clear directive of the course of history and the Antichrist power that would unite the entire world eventually under its domain. And we looked last night how, in spite of the Reformation that clearly identified it and caused a major rift in the world, separating millions and millions of people from their one-time, one-world basic religion that they had in terms of Christianity now. Of course, the papacy has connections with the other religions as well, and we'll be dealing with that in another lecture later on. So how did they do it behind the scenes? And we spoke about the secret societies and all of these issues last night. Now let's see how far down the line we are today. I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of the names of blasphemy. Revelation 17:3. Now, a woman in the Bible is a church. And if she is a prostitute church, then she is defined as the whore of Revelation. And here is this woman decked with scarlet colors, and she is riding the beast. And the beast is a political entity. And her name is full of blasphemy, full of the names of blasphemy. And Revelation 13 verse 4 said, "And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him?" Ever since the Reformation, the Christian world has been steeped in blood. Is that a fair statement? Yes. We've had so many wars, and history will reveal, and the judgment will reveal, that most of the wars had to do with religion. It started off, of course, with direct wars against Protestantism, the 30-year war, even the 100-year period of war and bloodshed in Europe. But the First World War, the Second World War, all of them, and even the wars going on now, have to do with religion. And we will see that religion is the actual battleground upon which these things are taking place. Now, Revelation 17:2 says, "With whom the kings," with this religio-political power, "the kings of the earth have committed fornication." So the rulers of the world, says the Bible, are in cahoots with the religio-political entity which is Roman Catholicism. And is it so? Can we see it in the world today? Well, we'll have to see whether the Bible is accurate. And the inhabitants, and this is the sad part, of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Wine is doctrine. Wine in the Bible is doctrine. And the inhabitants of the world have been made drunk with the doctrine of Rome. Now that's a horrendous statement. Why is Protestantism no longer protesting against the doctrines of Rome? Because they have internalized them. They have just altered them to suit their needs. And no longer is the papacy regarded as the Antichrist. They have swallowed the twin doctrines of preterism and futurism, both Jesuit doctrines, and so many Protestants believe that the Antichrist was already there. He was a Greek king, although of course the Bible says he comes out of the fourth beast and not the third beast. And the other lot say he's coming in the future, sometime in the future, and he'll come from the Middle East. Neither of them are biblical, because the Bible says He arises in Western Europe. It tells us when he will arise, and he comes out of Rome. He doesn't come out of Greece or any other nation in the world. So Protestantism has taken the heat of the papacy by accepting wine of Babylon. That's just one aspect. We'll look at a lot more later on. Now, the kings of the world, have they had their liaisons with Rome, yes or no? Yes, they have. Here we have Gorbachev with Pope John Paul II, and he recognized the power of this papacy. Here we have a man who apparently is anti-papacy, and that's Fidel Castro. And here he's seen together with the Pope. Now, you will remember a quote that I showed you yesterday, where the Jesuit says, if it suits their purposes, they will be arrayed at opposite sides of the political spectrum and even religious spectrum, and will seem to be fighting each other when behind the scenes, that's why this lecture is called that, like that, they're actually in cahoots. Does that make sense? So let's have a look at this man, Castro, just for a little while. He, of course, has his problems. Pretoria News, August 20, 1999. Here he gives a signal which is fascinating. The Pope also gives this signal very often. It's a Masonic signal picture. Masons use this picture as a sign. Now, here is a quote from the Federal Reserve Conspiracy, and it says, wherever a totalitarian movement erupts, whether communist or Nazi, fascist, a Jesuit can be found in the role of advisor or leader. In Cuba, it was Castro's father, Armando Lorente. So in Cuba, the advisor, the Chaldean, next to this political leader was a Jesuit. So behind the scenes, they're working together, but for political and religious expediency, publicly they present another face. Now, if we go to the kings and queens of the world, because the Bible says the kings of the world have committed fornication with her. In other words, decided to side with her and thereby be apostate towards God. That's what a prostitution means. Here is Queen Elizabeth and her husband, and they are dressed in what? Black. And they are with the Pope. And here is Prince Charles, dressed in black, together with the Pope. Here, the then-time head of the Anglican Church, the Right Reverend Runcie, also with the Pope. They wearing black, him wearing white. And Prince Charles said, because the King of England is the defender of the faith, being the Protestant faith. Prince Charles said, I no longer want to be the defender of the faith. I want to drop the word the. I want to be defender of faith. So this is fascinating. So they are committing fornication with this power. And the Right Reverend Runcie said that the Pope should be the primate, the head, even of the Anglican Church. So that is committing fornication. Again, how did they achieve this objective? Through Freemasonry. Here is the Duke of Kent. He is the Grand Master of Freemasonry in the United Kingdom, receiving his Masonic handshake. You would do well to look at that handshake. The finger pressing on the knuckle there, and here they are under the Masonic symbol. Now, he's the head Mason in the world. So we see the Western religious leaders and political leaders having liaison with the papacy. Now, what about the Islamic leaders? Exactly the same thing. Here are the Islamic leaders, whether they are high imams or whether they are political leaders, they have their liaisons with the papacy. Ronald Reagan is the one who finally broke the impasse and had diplomatic relations with the Vatican, even though it is against the American Constitution, which separates church and state. Ronald Reagan just did it. Harry Truman tried, but he was blasted off the scene as a consequence, but this man just did it. So here we have the leaders of the world from way back right until the present time, all of them being in liaison with this power. Margaret Thatcher, what is she wearing? Isn't it interesting that they all go in black? If I ever should be summoned, I'll be sure to wear a pink suit. And a bright blue tie or something like that. Anyway, here they are. And another former president of the United States, and the head of the Japanese government. It doesn't matter which government it is on the earth. They all have been to Rome. And the present leaders, are they in liaison with Rome? Yes. Do you recognize that man over there? That's the present president of the United States, and that's the present leader of the United Kingdom. All the kings of the world have committed fornication with the beast. And here, the President of the United States and Pope John Paul are under the picture of Ignatius Loyola. When they send a picture out, there is method in their action. They are very precise in what they do. Revelation 17:12 says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast." Now, there's a lot of speculation about this verse. It's interesting, just interesting, that Gary H. Carr says that the world has been divided into 10 regions. There's even talk that the United States, which consists of 50 states, has also been divided into 10 regions. So the number 10 seems to be a political entity, but it is also the number of completeness, which means that the kings of the world will receive power together with the beast for a period of time. Let's leave it at that. Now, at the moment, church and state is still separate in the public eye. Behind the scenes, not anymore. But they will receive power with the beast. That means the situation of the Middle Ages, where Rome dictated to the politicians how their doctrines should be implemented upon this world, will again be in force sometime in the future. Because Revelation 17:13 says these have one mind. In other words, the religious powers and the political powers together have one mind, and they shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So the papacy will be the central authority and spokesman for religious matters. This is fascinating. Now, imagine all the religions of the world coming to an agreement that the main spokesman for religion will be the papacy, and that certain papal moral dictates will be universally applicable. Wow. That means that certain criteria, like salvation in Christ and Christ alone, will have to be sacrificed, and obedience to God and God alone will have to be sacrificed in order to accommodate this new religious political entity. Isaiah says there will be a troublous time when this happens. Isaiah 26:20-21, "Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place to," what does it say? "Punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain." So it speaks about the resurrection of the dead in this text, and the Lord is coming to punish the nations. Now, how does that fit in with the so-called peace period that is coming, where everybody will be happy and accept Christianity? Does that make any sense? Well, let's go a little bit further. Let's see what Psalms 110 verse 5 and 6 says. The New King James Version renders it, "The Lord is at your right hand, he shall execute kings in the day of his wrath." Wow. "He shall judge among the nations, he shall fill the places with dead bodies, he shall execute the heads of many countries." That's a powerful text. There must be a very compelling reason why God would punish the leaders of this earth. And we have to see what they are actually doing. They are committing fornication with the beast, and what will be the end consequence of that fornication. Let's just look at this Jesuit quote again. It comes from Popery, Puserism, and Jesuitism. "At what then do the Jesuits aim? According to them, they only seek the greater glory of God, but if you examine the facts, you will find that they aim at universal dominion alone. Universal. The whole world must be politically and religiously subject to the dictates of Rome. They have rendered themselves indispensable to the Pope, who without them could not exist because Catholicism is identified with them. They have rendered themselves indispensable to governors and hold revolutions in their hands, and in this way, either under one name or another, it is they who rule the world." So whether they're called communism, communism was started by the Jesuits in their Paraguay experiments, their so-called reductions that they had there, and then they implemented it in the communistic regimes. So it is a Jesuit theology, if you like. So it is they who rule the world. Now they hold revolutions in their hands. If we look at the revolutions of the last centuries, we find that the French Revolution, 1789, was definitely governed by the Jesuits. Adam Weishaupt is the one who started the Jacobin clubs, and Jacobinism was the ones that ran the French Revolution. The American Revolution, there are quotes upon quotes upon quotes by presidents of the United States that the Jesuits were behind it. There's a DVD on this issue. By the way, these lectures are a summary of a number of lectures because we don't have the time, but the full story is on the DVDs. And then you had the Spanish Revolution. That's also a religious revolution. The Polish Revolution, the Italian Revolution, and the German Revolution of 1848. Plus the First World War and the Second World War, all of them fought for particular political, religious purposes. Let's look at the French Revolution because this one is pivotal. This is where the course of history was changed in a particular direction. And out of the French Revolution came the sacrifice of religion. For the sake of appearance, all religion, including Catholicism, was supposedly swept under the table, and the new mindset of the people themselves governing and a new set of norms to take the place of the Ten Commandments. Look how arrogant they are. How did they depict their first manifest of human rights? As 2 tablets of stone. So this is the Manifesto of Human Rights which came out of the French Revolution. Up there you have the triangle with the all-seeing eye in it. Of course, it comes from Egyptology, but it is the symbol of the Jesuits. You will find it in every single Jesuit enclave. Then you have the serpent with the tail in the mouth. That is the life-giving, eternal serpent, Lucifer. And then you have the Jacobin hat. And the Jacobin hat is what the revolutionaries wore when they enacted their revolutionary acts. And then you have a bundle of rods tied together with a spear through them. And this, of course, is a fasciae. Now, it's fascinating that you'll find the fasciae all over the Capitol building. You'll find it in your political arenas within this country. And this is distinctly Roman. The Jesuits were behind this. Remember that Weishaupt was a Jesuit, Voltaire was a Jesuit, all these people were Jesuit controlled. Now, what is a Jacobin hat? You see, they hide their symbols in plain sight because they think that the Goyim, the uneducated, will never get it anyway. What is a Jacobin hat? So I did some searching for the Jacobin hat, and now where do we find it? There it is. This is the god Mitra. Mitraism, the Persian sun god. Now Mitraism was the elite religion of Rome, and Catholicism is Mitraism. In Mitraism you have 7 grades. When you reach the highest grades, you become a priest and you are addressed as Father. In which religion does this take place? In Catholicism. It is a secret Luciferian sun worship theology which publicly puts forth a perdition faith, kissing Jesus, when in actual fact they keep him crucified in the Mass and in the crucifix. So this is a terrible deception. Mitraism is the secret religion of Rome. And that is why the Statue of Liberty has the crown of Mitra around it, because Rome says it was a gift from the French after the French Revolution to this country, and Rome is basically saying, you're mine after all, and I'll get you. And they have. Now, I told you about Albert Pike yesterday. Now, apparently, there's a lot of controversy. Some say this is not true, it never happened, and others swear by it. And apparently it was in the British Museum until a few years ago, the document, and then it was taken off display and disappeared. But anyway, he wrote a letter to Mancini dated August 15, 1871, in which he outlined plans for 3 world wars that were seen as necessary to bring about a one world order. This was Albert Pike already, the founder of Scottish Rite Freemasonry that we spoke about yesterday. Now, even if the letter is a fake, as many people claim, I have a little philosophy that says the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let's look at what he said, and then we'll see, did it happen like this? He said that the First World War was to overthrow the power of the Tsars in Russia, protector of the orthodoxy, and bring about an atheistic communist state. Did it happen? Yes. So it happened just like that. Why would they want to overthrow orthodoxy? Because orthodoxy refused to accept the primacy of the papacy. So you subject orthodoxy to communism, and they can get their power back on one condition, that they accept the authority of the papacy. Has it happened? Yes. Bartholomew has said, you can be the primate. Wow. Interesting. The Second World War was to originate between the Great Britain and Germany. Did it happen? Yes. To strengthen communism as antithesis to Judeo-Christian culture and bring about a Zionist state in Israel. Did it happen? Absolutely to the button. The Third World War was to be a Middle Eastern war involving Judaism and Islam and spreading internationally. Anybody heard of anything like that cooking up in the world today? So it is interesting, and whether they claim it's a fake or not, here's just another quote from another source giving the same information. So now let's have a look at the role players of the Second World War. On the one side, on the Allied side, you had, and by the way, the other side was called the axis of evil. You haven't heard that term, have you? All right. History tends to repeat itself. Now, the role players there were Winston Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin. And on the other side you had Adolf Hitler and the German regime. Let's have a look at some of these role players. According to this website, and many sources, Vladimir Lenin was a high Mason, and he was a member of the Grand Orient Lodge. Winston Churchill was a 33-degree Freemason and member of the Druid Order. I went into the London Lodge and looked at his Masonic regalia, but they have so much security and they lean over your shoulder, I couldn't photograph it. But it's there. Joseph Stalin was a member of the Grand Orient Lodge. Here is an indiscretion picture of Churchill in his Druid outfit, his Druid lodge. So he was a Mason. All of these people were high Masons. Winston Churchill comes from a very interesting family and is related by family to at least 4 presidents of the United States, plus the founder of the Mormon movement in this world, which was also heavily associated with a Jesuit called De Smet, but we'll get to that at a later stage. Fascinating stuff. Let's look at Roosevelt. He was a 33-degree Freemason. Now we've discovered yesterday what this means. Here is another picture of indiscretion where this picture was probably leaked out somehow, where Roosevelt is seen in his Masonic regalia. But I've been in so many lodges where you can get in, and we've been in some rooms where you can see all the presidents, and Roosevelt is listed in all of them, so there is no doubt about his affiliation. He was also a Shriner. Here he is in his Shriner regalia, President Roosevelt in Freemason regalia, and Myron Taylor, whom he made special delegate to the Vatican after Pacelli's visit. So here, through Freemasonry, we have a shift away from Protestantism towards Catholicism. Back to the mother. I will not suffer loss of children, she says. They will come back to me. Now let's look at the other side. So the one side is totally Masonic. What's the other side? Adolf Hitler said, quote, I learned much from the order of the Jesuits. Until now, there has never been anything more grandiose on the earth than the hierarchical system of the Catholic Church. I transferred much of this organization into my own party. Secret history of the Jesuits. The SS, which is an occult symbol, and bands like KISS, for example, use the SS, right? Was constituted according to the Jesuit principles. Himmler, head of the SS, was closely associated with the Jesuits through his father and brother. Hitler said of him, I see Himmler as our Ignatius Loyola. Joseph Goebbels was a trained Jesuit. So who controlled the military side or the political side of Germany? The Jesuits. Who controlled the other side? The Freemasons. Who controls the Freemasons? The Jesuits. So can you see how it works? And you have thesis, antithesis, you rub them up against each other. Who's the enemy? Who's the ultimate enemy? Protestantism is their enemy. And how did they divide up Germany afterwards? They took the big Protestant enclave, cut it out, East Germany, and gave it to Russia, and subjected Protestantism to enforced atheism for all those years. Now, who would suspect Rome of doing that? Nobody. In the bombings of Germany, which part of Germany was bombed to smithereens, where the people were bombed against the conventions of war, with fire bombs even? The north of Germany. Which part of Germany was Protestant? The north. Which part was Catholic? The south. So which part now rules? The south. So all of these were Catholic controlled. Here you have the cardinals and the military giving the Heil Hitler salute together. They were in cahoots, so there was no difference between the two sides. This was fought for a particular reason. Winston Churchill said, the creation of an authoritative world order is the ultimate aim towards which we must strive. So now, if they want to have the whole world under their control, out of this chaos of war, they get a United Nations which says, no more war. Let's beat our plowshares, our weapons into plowshares. No more war. Now, who's going to be the moral leader of that new world order? It'll have to be the papacy. and then the prophecy will be fulfilled. Now, people say there will be no new world order. So I want you to note the stature of the people who are saying there will be a new world order. Winston Churchill, I mean, you don't get higher than the prime minister who fought the war in the first place. The creation of an authoritative world order is the ultimate aim towards which we must strive. Charles de Gaulle, the president of France, nations must unite in a world government or perish. So this is history. So after the period of communism, suddenly the wall comes down and everybody is totally astonished. Of course it has to happen. Protestantism has been clipped its wings. It does no longer protest. And now it's time to bring about the new world order. So Gorbachev visits the Pope, and the Pope strides onto the arena of the Millennium Endgame, and a new world order is to be set up on this planet. In the book, The Keys of This Blood by Malachi Martin, the pontifical professor, he says, clearly the new agenda, heaven's agenda, the grand design of God. That's Masonic terminology, by the way. For the new world order had begun, and Pope John Paul would stride now in the arena of the Millennium Endgame as something more than a geopolitical giant of his age. He was and remains the serene and confident, notice the capitals, servant of the grand design. Masonic language for the main person, morally speaking, in the New World Order, and he is subject to the architect, the great architect of the universe, who is Lucifer, as we saw yesterday. So at the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, Pope John Paul became the spokesman for all religions on the entire planet. And in 2004, the Pope spent his entire address on a call for a new world order. And the political leaders, the Bushes and the Putins, who were the role players of the former communist and Western so-called Cold War period, agreed to this new world order in secret. The present Pope made no bones about it either, and Pope Benedict, Sunday, December 25, 2005, using his Christmas address, urged humanity to unite against terrorism, poverty, and environmental blight, and called for a new world order to correct economic imbalances. Now, this is fascinating. Please note the emphasis, to correct economic imbalances. Question: which nations on the planet are or were the richest nations on earth? The Catholic ones or the Protestant ones? The Protestant ones. The United States, God richly blessed this country beyond what the mind can imagine. A Protestant enclave, Southern Africa, the richest country in the world. We had all the gold reserves, all the diamond reserves that we could possibly dream of. And where are they today? Heading towards a precipice that is unbelievable. And that wealth must be taken away from Protestantism because they never deserved it, and it must be redistributed. That's fascinating. So who's going to get it? We'll have a look at that. So this Pope, the present Pope, made no bones about it. Immediately he called for a new world order. Now, how had they been setting it up behind the scenes? Building a New World, 1989, the Bush-Gorbachev summit, was called a gateway to the millennium of freedom. And George Bush said that only the United States had the moral standing and the means to back it up, this new world order. And he's the first one to publicly, remember he was a member of which organization? Skull and Bones. Controlled by who? By the Jesuits. Let's see what he had to say.
Where institutions of freedom have lain dormant, the United Nations can offer them new life. These institutions play a crucial role in our quest for a new world order. an order in which no nation must surrender one iota of its own sovereignty, an order characterized by the rule of law rather than the resort to force.
So here must come a new order. Every nation must be subject to it, and if it doesn't become subject to it, it won't exist. It doesn't have much of a choice. And Associated Press, February 14, 2005, Kofi Annan, who was the United Nations head, said he urged the European Union and the United States to work more closely as the backbone of the new world order in the 21st century. Strange. Does he include Russia there? Does he include China in that statement? No. The United States and Europe, they're the ones that must work together. And the United States will be the military power to force it through, and Europe under the papacy, and the United States is an arm of Europe because you are of European descent. Well, where do we go with Europe? How do they stand? Maastricht, the new Europe, the nations coming together, 12 stars. Did you know there were never 12 member states? At no stage, not even in the beginning. Now, where do the 12 stars come from? Well, the 12 stars are the 12 stars around the head of Mary. And the color is blue, which is the color of Mary. Now, the color blue is very interesting. I haven't got time for all of this. I really must get on. Never mind. This is a poster that was put out by the President of the European Union, and that was Jacques Delors. And here they posted this poster publicly. It is the Tower of Babel, and there's a crane on it because the Tower of Babel is under construction. And he says, this Jacques Delors said, we are building a new Babel, and this time we will succeed. Now, wow, that is a statement in the face of whom? Of God. Please note that the 12 stars are upside down in the shape of the goat of Mendes head. This is Luciferian. And here's another little clue for you. One of the stars is hidden behind the central tower so that you can only count how many stars? 11. In Masonry, the number 11 is the number of chaos. So if you hear the number 11, then listen up. 9, 11. Well, Arthur Waite, who was a very high Freemason, of course, also author of many Masonic books, he says Babel, of course, represented a Masonic enterprise. That's fascinating. Go a little bit further. It says over here, they remembered that the people who were of one language and one speech journeyed from the east to the west, Masonic language, like those who have tried and proved as master masons. When they reached blah, 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 blah. Notice what he says here. Out of evil comes good, however, and the confusion of tongues gave rise to the ancient practice of Masons conversing without the use of speech. Who? Out of evil comes good. So who was the author of evil by destroying the Tower of Babel? God. Fascinating stuff you can pick up if you read carefully what these people are saying. And in Europe, the new parliament building is a replica of the Tower of Babel. It is built like the Tower of Babel. And the ironwork around it is to represent the scaffold of reconstruction. So here is a superimposition of the Parliament building and the Tower of Babel. Notice the way in which it has been built. So Europe is defiantly in its symbolism saying, we defy you, God. We will make undone what you have set in place. Here is the new European identity card that every European must carry. And if you look on it, I've taken the name of this person off. and you will see that it is the goat of Mendes. Straight there on it. They don't even hide it. Let's look at this Holy Alliance, which one author called the Unholy Alliance, between the United States and the papacy. It's interesting to note that Archbishop Quigley in 1903 in the Chicago Tribune said, when the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. That's a fascinating statement. Now, how does the papacy stand in terms of the power structures of the secret societies and political associations in the world? Well, here is the Trilateral Commission. All the gentlemen and ladies in black, with who in the middle? The Pope. So who is the center around which it revolves? The papacy. Here is the Pope around B'nai B'rith. That's Jewish Freemasonry. So who controls what happens in Israel? The Pope. If you don't believe it, Yasser Arafat was in trouble a few years ago with his own people. Who gave and he was the most sought after terrorist in the world, according to Israel. They had put a price even on his head. Who gave the instruction that Yasser Arafat, who was in danger from his own people, was to be whisked to safety to Rome? The Pope. Who went and fetched him? A French frigate. Who brought him to the frigate? The Mossad. Excuse me, they have him in their hands and they hand him over? This is weird, isn't it? And off he goes, and when things are safe, they bring him back, and, well, the rest is history. Let's have a look at some of the role players in the United States. Bill Clinton was a Demolay. That's the youth group of the Freemason fraternity. He was also educated in Oxford, where they have the group, which is the British arm of the Illuminati, which is the equivalent of Skull and Bones. Just for interest's sake. Here's his wife, Hillary. She's wearing an interesting brooch. If we enlarge it, you will see it is the phoenix rising from the ashes. He's making a sign, and they will say, well, certain football clubs, use this sign. So maybe they're just football fans. Here's an excerpt from the Satanic Bible, and you will see that that is a symbol that is used by Satanists. Now, it could be chance. Don't condemn everyone that speaks, and does this by chance. You must look at the philosophy. You must study many things. You must be very circumspect when we use signs. But it's just interesting if we look at this, and you see there is Prince William. He's obviously also a football fan. There is Dan Quayle, and he's a football fan. And there is the present president, and he's a football fan. And Tom Ridge is a football fan. And it seems as if the wife of the president is also a football fan. Also fascinating is that the daughters of the president are also football fans. And these are many, many occasions at his inauguration. He gave this signs. He said it was because of the football affiliation, but it seems King Abdullah also supports the same team. He does the same sign. Here is an interesting picture involving Arnold Schwarzenegger. There is a man who many claim is actually, Yasser Arafat many claim that he was actually a Jesuit. And here is the Italian Prime Minister who's a football fan, and John Edwards. There are many, many football fans in the world. And if we look at these two gentlemen over here, these are fascinating pictures. Now, I don't want to go into the symbolism because people can really get hooked on it, and I don't want that to happen. But a very high occult sign in witchcraft is to keep the hand together and slightly remove the little finger. And it just fascinates me that you have it there, and you have it there, and you have it there. Can you see it? And that could be pure chance, so please don't put any emphasis on it. But this is not chance. There is Kerry with his posters around him, and why should they spell 666? That is not chance. Well, the Bible says in Revelation 13:4, and they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with them. So they're actually worshipping Lucifer. And people are being deceived into thinking this is marvelous. At least we're getting back to some form of morality. So at what do the Jesuits aim? They aim at universal dominion, and they hold revolutions in their hands, and it is they who rule the world. And they do it by creating chaos, and the order that comes out of the chaos suits Rome, because that's where they're heading. Now let's have a look at a very important person. His name is George Weigel, who is Senior Fellow of the Ethics and Public Policy Center in Washington, D.C. Now, he no longer holds this position, as far as I know, because he has just been appointed as advisor to Pope Benedict. So this is not just anyone. These are the people, the movers and the shakers of American policy. And he said the following: the process of ordering and organizing the world is at the moment going forward. The issue is not whether we shall have order in the world. The contemporary condition of chaos, notice the terminology, isn't it fascinating? Well, by the way, this is an address that he held at Columbia University, and it was also published in First Things in May 2004. So this is a document by a very, very prominent American. So the contemporary condition of chaos has become intolerable on a world scale, and the insistent demand of the peoples of the world is for order. The question is then, on what principles is the world going to be organized? That's a good question, isn't it? Right. He continues, a new conversation is in order, a conversation about order. The principles that will guide the ordering of the world, please note the world, and the principles that will guide the response of public authorities to multiplied disorders of the world. That conversation should result in a revitalization of Catholic international relations theory, which will be good for the church and good for the world. So, who is supposed to be the moral power in the New World Order? Rome. Rome is supposed to be that power. So conflict between civilizations will be the latest phase in the evolution of conflict in the model world. This is Samuel Huntington, The Clash of Civilization, Foreign Affairs, summer 1993. Now this famous professor, he said that the final clash will be between these civilizations, the Islamic world and the Christian world. And the politicians in England and in the United States have grabbed this and are running with it. Conflict between civilizations will be the latest phase in the evolution of conflict in the modern world. In much of the world, religion has moved in to fill the gap, often in the form of movements that are labeled fundamentalists. Such movements are found in Western Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, as well as Islam. In most countries and most religions, the people active in fundamentalist movements are young, college-educated, middle class, technicians, professionals, business persons. The unsecularization of the world, George Weigel has remarked, is one of the dominant social factors of life in the late 20th century. The revival of religion, as Gilles Kebel labeled it, provides a basis for identity and commitment that transcends national boundaries and unites civilizations. So now you can see that the politicians of the world are saying that religion, instead of creating chaos, must bind us together. In other words, the pain of religious clash must become greater than the pain of giving up your religious dogmas in order to have peace. Does that make sense? That's scary. That's very scary. Well, let's have a look at the big Protestant movers in the world. Robert Schuller, in an interview with Larry King, asking why you have met the Grand Mufti and why are you here? The idea of bringing religions together, right? Schuller says, absolutely. We're in a totally new era. The age of being able to indoctrinate people is finished. King. Does this visit, Robert Schuller, give you encouragement? Schuller, oh, absolutely. The Grand Mufti says religion is like rain that falls. The extremists pollute the pure water. I predict we're going to focus in the next millennium as religious leaders to clean up the pollution in religion. So anything that is extreme, anything that says my religion and my religion alone will have to go. Wow. Now, remember that they said there's going to be this clash. Now, let's have a look at the two powers that are squaring up. From the Islamic world, which one is the leading power? Iran, no doubt. From the Western world, which one is the leading power? The United States. Do we have a thesis and an antithesis? Yes. Iran speaks about a new world order. Iran's foreign ministry Monday asked for an international community to modernize its understanding of global politics and its approach to the war on terror. So they're saying we need a new world order based on Islamic principles. And the West is saying we need a new world order based on other principles. Well, here is the Pope, and he's speaking with an Islamic leader, the Pope with Mubarak. Pope Benedict met with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak March 13, that was 2006, that was last year, to discuss the situation in the Middle East, tensions surrounding Iran's nuclear program, and religious tolerance in Egypt and the Vatican. And here they're coming together and saying, let's work together. Remember the Hegelian principle? Thesis, antithesis. What is the President of the United States doing? Firstly, he's linking Judaism to Christianity. Because as a Christian, he attends Jewish services. President Bush is moving Jews into the Republican Party, but he also wants to bring moderate Muslims into the power base. And one of the chaplains of the Navy has just been appointed, is a Muslim. Fascinating things happening. Now, if we look at an interesting speech here by this very interesting lady, Condoleezza Rice, she had a speech in 2005 in which she said the following. Jacobitism Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice used the February 8th speech in Paris to extol the Bush's administration's global democratic revolution, which she says continues the work of the 18th century French Revolution. Wow! Who started that work? The Jesuits. To gain control of a world that had turned its back on the papacy and sided with Protestantism. So this work is continuing, she says. Now let's have a look at the Department of the Army of the United States of America and tell me whether you see anything interesting in this symbolism. What's that? It's a Jacobean hat. See, they put their symbols there. They know exactly what they are doing. That symbol is not there for any other reason. George Bush said in an interview, I'm invested with a divine mission to promote the biblical worldview in the policy carried out by the United States of America. Isn't that fascinating? Thesis. The clash of civilizations. Where's the antithesis? Divine mission driving Iran's new leader. The ultimate promise of all divine religions, says Ahmadinejad, will be fulfilled with the emergence of the perfect human being, the 12th Imam, who is heir of all prophets. He will lead the world to justice and absolute peace. Almighty Lord, I pray to you to hasten the emergence of your last repository, the promised one. So here is a man who says, I have a divine mission, and he said so at the United Nations. We have thesis, antithesis. How it's going to pan out? Watch CNN for details. Yeah. This is the Report newspaper, 23rd April 2006. Bush is gereed. Bush is ready for a conflict with Iran. Whether it will happen, whether it won't happen, we'll see. Pike said there will be 3 conflicts. We'll wait. What happened to Africa? Large parts of Africa were Protestant. Ethiopia was Protestant. And during the Second World War, Mussolini, who was supposed to be fighting the British, sent his army down to Ethiopia. What was he doing down there? And he flattened that nation, and to this day that poor nation is dumped in turmoil and poverty. They've destroyed Protestantism in that nation. And they've used Islam in many areas to destroy the vestiges of Protestantism. Let's look at Southern Africa. Southern Africa was totally Protestant. Yes, there were atrocities done there. But how it was set up is a long, long story. I haven't got time for it. But let's just look at the role players. Mandela is compared to Jesus Christ. Here are the peacemakers, the ones who received Nobel Peace Prizes. And you will find that Mandela is there and de Klerk is there, receiving very interesting handshakes here in the Congress at the United States, with Nelson Mandela looking on. Nelson Mandela says he's not involved in religion. He's not a member of any particular denomination. Here you have the Cardinal of Cape Town of the Catholic Church giving him the Mass. Now, Catholic canon law says only Catholics may receive the Mass. That's fascinating. Here he is married to the widow of Samora Machel, and he was married with full Hindu ritual, and he was married with full Islamic ritual, and he was married with full Jewish ritual, and he was married with full Christian ritual. What message is he sending? All religions are the same. Here you have 2 interesting people holding hands. The one is Mugabe of Zimbabwe, and the other one is Mbeki of South Africa. This man has taken the white farms, white-held farms, they were Protestants, all away, and now he's giving back some to whites. But Protestantism has been wiped out in terms of its power base, and there has been a redistribution of wealth. Okay, in South Africa, they're murdering the white farmers, left, right, and center. But this is not a racial issue, this is a religious issue. What have they done to the Zulu nation, which is a black nation? They have divided it in the middle, and the blood flowed like you cannot believe. Because half of it is Catholic and half of it is Protestant. Too much of it is Protestant, so it may not rule, so the Xhosas rule and they're Catholic. So this is an impasse. The strongest nation in Southern Africa is not ruling. The second strongest. How did they achieve that? With bloodshed, separating them. And it's a horrendous story. It's religious. It's got nothing to do with color. And in Zimbabwe, where the country is in ruins, what are they building? These magnificent buildings going up there, brand new in the middle of chaos. And what does it say there? Jesuit province of Zimbabwe. The Jesuits are building their Africa headquarters right there. Isis Horus Set, the Egyptian Trinity. And the new coat of arms of Southern Africa is the phoenix rising from the ashes and the 7-spired crown of Mitra. Now let's go to the United Nations and see how they're putting this together. They have won the war. We, as Protestants, have lost it. What is the United Nations doing? Yutant said, he was, I think, the 3rd Secretary General, World Federalists hold before us the vision of a unified mankind living in peace under a just world order. The heart of their program, a world under law, is realistic and attainable. There's Yutant with Pope Paul VI. He was a communist, Yutant. Here is the next, one of the next ones. This is Waldheim with the same Pope receiving the same hearty greeting. He was a fascist. You see, it doesn't matter whether you are from the one extreme or the other extreme. The end justifies the means. And Pope Paul VI, the one who was shaking the hands of these founder powers in the United Nations, he's the first one to use this broken cross with Christ with a Masonic triangle. If you turn him upside down, he's an emaciated, beaten enemy hanging on a broken cross. It's an occult cross. Pope Paul VI wrote a papal encyclical that called on the nations to abandon sovereignty and to form a world government. Here is the broken cross. It's a symbol of what they call the mark of the beast. Fascinating. John Paul II took the same staff, and Benedict has taken the same staff. Now, the United Nations, people think is only political, but that's the facade. The real battle is religious. So in the United Nations, there are many sub-organizations, and one of them is called the Temple of Understanding. Now, it's always important to know who founds these organizations to see what political clout they have. Founded by Juliet Hollister in 1960, the Temple of Understanding has as one of its goals the creation of a spiritual United Nations. Now, who were the founders? U Thant, that's the Secretary General. The President of the United States, Thomas Merton, Jawaharlal Nehru, Anwar Sadat. There you have Islam involved. And Radhakrishnan, here you have, who involved? Hinduism. And where are they based? They're based at the Cathedral of St. John, oops, what a name, the Divine. Now please, the name itself of that cathedral is a blasphemy. Why? Because St. John was never divine. It is the acronym Lucifer who says we are gods, therefore we are divine. Here is this cathedral. They also had a female Christ hanging in this cathedral, who they called Christa. It's the head of the Episcopal Diocese, which is basically the Anglican Church. Now, one of the most important people in the United States in terms of the spiritual evolution was Robert Miller. He's the former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, and he said we must move as quickly as possible to a one-world government, a one-world religion, under a one-world leader. Fascinating. So now these are the top people in the United Nations themselves speaking. Where does the United Nations get its philosophy from? It gets its philosophy from Teilhard de Chardin. Now, who was Teilhard de Chardin? He was, you've guessed it, a Jesuit. Right. Teilhard dreamed of humanity merging into God, and each realizing his own godhood at the omega point. Now you can see this philosophy coming out in a Jesuit. This belief has inspired many of today's New Age leaders. In fact, Teilhard de Chardin is most frequently quoted writer by leading New Age occultists. So he says, we are God. I showed you that philosophy yesterday. It's going to become very important. Teilhard de Chardin, Dr. Robert Miller, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, says Teilhard had always viewed the United Nations as the progressive institutional embodiment of his philosophy. So the United Nations is the institutional embodiment of whose philosophy? Which organization? The Jesuits. The Jesuits. Teilhard wrote, although the form is not yet discernible, mankind tomorrow will awaken to a pan-organized world. We're heading in that direction. Robert Miller wrote, Teilhard de Chardin, influenced by his companion, Father de Brevery, who inspired his colleagues, who started a rich process of global long-term thinking in the UN, which affected many nations and people around the world. And then Robert Miller says, I have myself been deeply influenced by Teilhard. By which philosophy? Jesuit philosophy. He says, any Teilhardian will recognize in this the spiritual transcendence which he announced so emphatically as the next step in our evolution. So where's mankind going? So he was a French Jesuit, he was a eugenist, he was a Marxist, he was a pantheist, he was an evolutionist, and he was a humanist. And he's the father of the New Age and the founder of the philosophy of the United Nations. Here are a few of his quotes. It is a law of the universe that in all things there is prior existence. Before every form there is a prior but lesser evolved form. Each one of us is evolving towards Godhead. So basically they believe we're gods. What I'm proposing is to narrow that gap between pantheism and Christianity by bringing out what one might call the Christian soul of pantheism, or the pantheistic aspect of Christianity. Whoa! Now we've got a clue. Pantheism comes in many forms. And has Protestantism swallowed pantheism, yes or no? That's a question we must ask ourselves. I can be saved only by becoming one with the universe. That's Buddhism. I believe that the Messiah whom we await, whom we all without any doubt await, is the universal Christ, that is to say, the Christ of evolution. And here is his famous quote. This is in Christianity and Evolution, Teilhard de Chardin. He said, "A general convergence of religions upon a universal Christ who satisfies them all. That seems to me the only possible conversion of the world and the only form in which a religion of the future can be conceived." Wow. So if we have a universal Christ that satisfies all religions, what must then happen to Jesus Christ? Must he become less or more? He must become less. He must be the equivalent of all the Buddhas and all the emanations and the Sai Babas and who these people all are in the world. He's just another one of them. And the text in the Bible which says there is no other name under heaven and earth whereby you can be saved except the name Christ Jesus will have to be what? Trashed. Let's look at how the United Nations is really a spiritual organization enacting a spiritual unity. Well, one of the second one in fact, Secretary General's was Dag Hammarskjöld, and he set up the prayer room in the United Nations. And he has this trapezoid building with all this symbolism, which is New Age symbolism, and he says, "The stone in the middle of the room has more to tell us. We may see it as an altar, empty not because there is no God, not because it is an altar to an unknown God, but because it is dedicated to the God whom man worships under many names and many forms." Well, excuse me, the prayer room in the United Nations is not dedicated to my God, because he has a name and he is not worshipped under many forms. Is that correct? So this is paganism. And now they want a new world religion. The man behind the scenes moving is Dr. Miller, and he was, of course, chairman of the Peace Party 2000, philosopher of hope. He was top-level global spokesperson. He's also the chancellor of the University of Peace in the United Nations. So this is a very high-level person. He also received the top UNESCO prizes, etc. He says, was it not inevitable that the UN would sooner or later acquire a spiritual dimension? He says that Pope John Paul II said that we were stone cutters and artisans. What is that kind of language? Masonic language. I like it that you are so with it here. So he says that this is becoming a reality. This Masonic empire, Luciferian empire, Jesuit empire, Catholic empire is being built in the world. The tapestry of its work encompasses the total condition of humankind on this planet. That means every aspect, spiritual, temporal, everything. All this is part of one of the most prodigious pages of evolution. It will require the detachment and objectivity of future historians to appraise fully what happened in the last third of our century and to understand what the real significance of the United Nations was. What was the real significance? Let's ask Robert Muller. Remember who this man is? He says, no human force will ever be able to destroy the United Nations. He hasn't read Daniel 2. For the United Nations is not a mere building or a mere idea. It is not a man-made creation. So if it's not man-made, who made it? Well, it certainly wasn't God, because the prayer room is not dedicated to God. The United Nations is the vision light of the absolute supreme, Masonic language, which is slowly, steadily, and unerringly illuminating, Masonic language, the ignorance, the night of our human life. The divine success and supreme progress of the United Nations is bound to become a reality. At his choice hour, the absolute supreme will ring his own victory bell here on earth through the loving and serving heart of the United Nations. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Robert Muller, what's his philosophy? He says, decide to open yourself to the potential of the human race, to the infinity of your inner self, and you will become the universe, at long last, your real divine self. Same philosophy, we're gods. And now, in the New Genesis, which he wrote in 1982, The Global Spirituality, he says the world's major religions in the end all want the same thing. Even though they were born in different places and circumstances on the planet, what the world needs today is a convergence, a coming together, of the different religions in the search for the definition of the cosmic or divine laws which ought to regulate our behavior on this planet. Worldwide, spiritual ecumenism expressed in new forms of religious cooperation and institutions would probably be closest to the heart of the resurrected Christ. But that's a cosmic Christ who satisfies them all, not my one. My great personal dream is to get a tremendous alliance between all the major religions and the UN. So this is where the UN is going. And so in 1995, they started an organization called the United Religious Organization, which was to be fully operational by June 2005. So they have a timetable. It's just recently fully operational. And this is what Robert Muller said about it. Do not worry if not all religions will join the United Religions Organization. Many nations did not join the UN at its beginning, but later regretted it and made every effort to join. It was the same with the European community. It will be the case with the world's religions, because whoever stays out or aloof will sooner or later regret it. Does that sound like a threat? So you're either part of it or you're out. He writes, the world major religions must speed up dramatically their ecumenical movement and recognize the unity and objective in the diversity of their cults. Religions must actively cooperate to bring to unprecedented heights a better understanding of the mysteries of life and our place in the universe. Now listen to what he says. My religion, right or wrong, my nation, right or wrong, must be abandoned forever in the planetary age. So very soon, I will not be able to preach that Jesus is the only way. It'll be against the law. In fact, it's already part of the hate law code. The laws are already on the books. How do they achieve it? Through education. The world will not change and find peace if there is not a new education, said U Tant. So our children have to be indoctrinated. The former director of the World Health Organization, please note the people I'm quoting. These are the big guns in the world. He says, to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, loyalty to family traditions, national patriotism, and religious dogmas. Whoa, that's some agenda. That's some agenda. UNESCO was founded by Julian Huxley, of course. What was he? Skull and Bones member. Humanist Manifesto 2 was signed by him, Skull and Bones member, or at least Archibald MacLeish was Skull and Bones member, wrote the UNESCO Constitution, and several Freemasons helped create the organization. So here they go. What do they want to achieve? Under his guidance, under Huxley's guidance, the United Nations prepared a guidebook for teachers. And this is being implemented worldwide. And this guidebook reminds them that the destruction of a child's love of country and patriotism is the first step in educating the child for world citizenship. Fascinating. On page 8 of this document, it says, the kindergarten or infant school has a significant part to play in the child's education. Not only can it correct many of the errors of home training, excuse me, who's creating the errors of home training? The parents are. The parents are. I'll tell you a little secret. Human rights, and the Pope says, I'm the champion of human rights, negates every single law of God. How would you like that? Every single law of God is removed by human rights. The first one says, I am the Lord your God, you shall not have any other gods besides me. Human rights says you will accept all other gods as equal. My religion, right or wrong, must disappear forever. The second commandment says you may not make for yourself idols. Idolatry is part and parcel of every religion, and therefore if you say anything against it, you are conducting hate speech. And we can go through the 10 commandments and you will see amazing things. We'll come to that in a little while. All right, we don't have to go into great detail. Robert Miller was asked to create a world core curriculum, which was to be operational in 2005. And so in many countries in the world, you had a new curriculum after 2005, including my country. And in the new curriculum, evolution must be taught, or your school will be closed. In the new curriculum, there will now be a religious studies. And little children will be taught all the religions of the world and must be able to recite the prayers of Islam and Hinduism and all the other religions. If you want to do homeschooling and take your children to your home, the inspector will come to your home to see if your children can do it, and if they can't, you will be punished. That's the new curriculum. Fascinating stuff. He's also the founder of the Framework for World Media Coverage. Notice what he says. He says the underlying philosophy upon which the Robert Miller School is based will be found in the teachings set forth in the books of Alice A. Bailey. Wow. That is the occult channel, who is the subsequent leader of the Theosophy Society, of which Blavatsky was the founder. And her books were published by Lucifer Publishing Company, later called Lucis Trust. And the United Nations says this is the basis for the new education. Occultism, demonic. There must be a new economic order. I want to tell you a little bit about this new international economic order. Now, the basis of all of this comes from the Jesuits and comes from Roman Catholicism. So let me quote for you the famous encyclical of the papacy, Rerum Novarum. Now, this is quite an old encyclical, but Pope John Paul II said this is the one that must be implemented in the entire world. So I'm interested to hear what it has to say. In this encyclical, the Roman Church State allied herself with the proletariat, which in Marxism is the great and final enemy of the capitalist order. Let's look at the economic thought of the Roman Catholic Church. Thomas Aquinas, one of their philosophers, wrote, because the goods of some are due to others by natural law, there is no sin if the poor take the goods of their neighbors. Thomas wrote, in cases of need, all things are common property, so that it would seem to be no sin in taking another's property, for need has made it common. Okay, what does the Bible say? Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not even covet thy neighbor's goods. That's what the Bible says. Redistribution of wealth. Please give me another term for redistribution of wealth. Stealing from those who have and giving it to those who you think should have it. Right? Is it breaking the commandments of God? Yes or no? So this Roman Catholic philosophy, is it breaking the commandments of God? Yes. And the Bible says, sin is the transgression of the law, So the man of sin writes encyclicals where he says, this is fine. Let's have a look. Here we have his article, Summa Theologica. He says, not only is such taking of another's property not a sin, it's not even a crime. Fascinating. It is lawful for a man to succor his own need by means of another's property by taking it either openly or secretly, nor is this, properly speaking, theft and robbery. It is not theft, properly speaking, to take the secretly and use another's property in case of extreme need, because that which he takes for the support of his life becomes his own property by reason of that need. In case of a like need, a man may also take secretly another's property in order to succor his neighbor in need. Whoa, this is neat. Now, a few years ago, if I found a thief in my house and I shot him, in my country or any other country, did you go to jail? No. If I found a murderer in my house who had murdered my child, raped my wife, and I shot him, did I go to jail? No. What happens today in either of those two cases? I go to jail. For what? For murder. Because I must prove that he meant me bodily harm. My child's already dead, doesn't affect me. My wife's already raped, doesn't affect her anymore. And he hasn't put a hole in me, therefore I may not touch him. Who is being protected today? The criminal. All over the world. This is Roman Catholic economic thought. And in which countries is it mainly implemented? Protestant countries. Let's read further. Now we'll see what John Paul has to say on it. Now let's go to the modern papacies. He writes in his encyclical in 1987 on social concerns, it is necessary to state once more the characteristic principle of Christian social doctrine. The goods of this world are originally meant for all. The right of private property is valid and necessary, but it does not nullify the value of this principle. Private property, in fact, is under a social mortgage, which means that it has an intrinsically social function based upon and justified precisely by the principles of universal destination of goods. Brilliantly written. What does it mean? It means that the house that you possess, the property that you possess is not yours. It has a social function. If somebody has more need of it than you, he can take it. So in my country, or in England, or in Europe, in any place, if a building is empty and you come back and it's full of squatters, can you evict them? No. You cannot evict them because this law is implemented on a universal scale. So you seem to have property, but you really have none. They can take it away like that. Today, if you commit a crime, can they come and take away and confiscate all your property? Yes or no? Legally, yes. Could they do it in the past? No. Why have the laws all changed? The policemen in my country say that they are desperate. They may do nothing. The criminal is protected to the hilt. Now let's have a look at these laws. Gaudium Express, that's the Vatican II Constitution. These are official documents of the Roman Catholic Church. John Paul II quoted at greater length. He says, if one is in extreme necessity, he has the right to procure for himself what he needs out of the riches of others. Good grief. So, authorized theft is permissible. He writes, all goods includes not just goods found in nature, but manufactured goods as well. John Paul II declared that all men must have access to those goods which were intended for common use, both the goods of nature and manufactured goods. So, a thief walks into my house, grabs a TV and walks off. Nothing happens to him. They stand at the traffic light, put a gun to your head and said, get out. Sometimes they don't even do that. They just blow you away and pull you out and take your car. And off they go. After all, he has need of it. He's walking and you're driving. I have need to drive, so I'm going to drive now, and I'm going to take your car. And people are getting away with it left, right, and center. The New World Order is based on principles which will eradicate possessions in Protestants and transfer them to where Rome rightfully believes they should be. And Protestants are dispensable. They are dispensable. And what the papacy has done in its history, it will do again. So we have a World Economic Forum. And here are the movers and shakers of the World Economic Forum. There's an ex-president of the United States. There's the richest man in the world. There's the representative of the third world countries, Thabo Mbeki from Southern Africa. There is the European representative. And what's he doing there? What's Bono doing there? Well, let's have a look at him. What's he wearing round his neck? The broken cross. Who does he associate with? With the Pope, whose main staff is the same bent or broken cross dedicated as Mark of the Beast. And he's getting the Masonic finger. Fascinating. Are the rock stars of the world the friends of the president? Yes, they are. Here's Kid Rock giving the satanic sign together with Bill Clinton. Here's Bono. I could show you thousands of these photographs. In South Africa, Bono was the guest to Nelson Mandela's concert, rock concert, where the big dignitaries were sitting by him. The rock concert was 46664. Fascinating stuff. The Bible says in Daniel that music will play a pivotal role in bringing about the bowing down to the image of the beast. And the rock world and the music world is being integrated so that the youth, looking at their heroes on the stage, will say what they're doing is the greatest thing that we can imagine. They're presented to the world as the great philanthropists, but behind the scenes, they're occultists, and they're working for another force. Revelation 19:19 says, "And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army." We're heading for a clash between those that side with Jesus Christ and those that side with this political, religious beast power that is becoming a reality on the planet. The Bible says that this beast was taken, and with him the false prophet, we'll deal with that, who wrought miracles before him, with whom he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image, and both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. And the remnant was slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeds out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. I have one commission, and that is to warn people to make a decision. And what is this mark of the beast that will be implemented? And who are these powers? Who is this false prophet? And what are these powers that are giving their armies to support the dictates of the beast? Many of these things you can already guess. Revelation 19:6 says, "And I heard as it were the voice of a great multitude, and as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of mighty thunderings, saying, Hallelujah, for the Lord God omnipotent reigneth, because the stone is about to be cut loose without human hands. And soon the entire political structure, religio-political structure on this planet will be brought to naught. Because Jesus Christ will not longer, much longer, tolerate what's going on this planet. And my wish is that everybody will be forewarned so that they can make intelligent decisions. you.